Truth Unveiled here, and today I have some very intriguing information to share with you. Today we're going to be talking about and discussing the possible real day that the Messiah actually died and the possible real year that he died. And what you're going to find is that it's not what our enemies are purporting. It's not on no April 3rd, 33 AD. You're going to see, and again, you be the final judge to decide if this was the real true day that the Messiah died and then, of course, was resurrected after the 3 days and the 3 nights to become our perfect Passover lamb who died and atoned for all of our iniquities and transgressions. Now, before I get into the actual video and share the information with you, I want to base this on scripture. So I want to share this scriptural passage with you in AURYAHU, or Luke chapter 23, verses 45 through 47, that says, "And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two. And crying out with a loud voice, YAHUSHA said, Father, into your hands I commit my RESURRECTED. And having said this, he breathed his last. And the captain, seeing what took place, praised YAHUAH, saying, Truly, this man was righteous." So the reason I read that is because I wanted to turn your attention to verse 45 specifically that says, "And the sun was darkened." Now, this is the actual Passover account because we know YAHUSHA died on Passover, and we know that it says the sun was darkened. And as we enter the season of Passover, this is a very timely video indeed. Now, for more precepts, you can also read more of the accounts of this in MathathYAHU, Matthew chapter 27, verses 44 through 53, as well as Mark chapter 15, verses 29 through 39. Now, what I will do is I will link these scriptural references in the description box below, or actually reference them so you can take a look at them. However, the reason I'm bringing this to your attention and the reason why this is so important is because we're focusing specifically on when it says that the sun was darkened, meaning that could there have been an actual solar eclipse taking place during the time of YAHUSHA's death? Now we're here looking at solar eclipses, and the reason why we're here at this website, now it is from NASA, we have to be here so we can understand and get a better understanding not only of scripture, but also trying to pinpoint the exact day that YAHUSHA could have died, and was it Passover that day? Now this gives a list of all of the partial, annular, total, and hybrid eclipses that took place throughout the world, throughout history, for the courses of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Now, this is the actual catalog right here of solar eclipses. And you can see right here, a catalog of solar eclipses from the year 1 AD to 100 AD. Now, again, our enemies and our liars like to tell us that this occurred sometime in the 30s AD in order to keep us brainwashed by their lies. Again, folks, this is why knowing who you are is so important. This is why language is so important. And this is why knowing the true locations of our history and where scripture took place, this is why all of this stuff is so important, so that your enemies cannot lie and deceive you like the word tells you. Trust not your enemy. So again, you can actually go to the NASA website to find the catalog of solar eclipses. Now, again, we know NASA, they lie when it comes to planets and when it comes to everything they're trying to show, like with the moon landings. But one thing they are not lying about is when it comes to solar eclipses, because again, that's something that happens naturally that YAHUAH allows to happen for specific purposes, just like we know with the 2017 and 2024 eclipses, as we'll go over later on in this video. And we're going to tie that into this video right here, because what you're going to see is that is there a potential 2,000 years difference? You're going to see what I mean. But this gives the 5 millennium catalog of solar eclipses. So all the way back from scriptural ancient times to 2000 before the Messiah, all the way up until 3000 AD. Now, the one that we're interested is this one right here, the one that occurred during the time of YAHUSHA, from 1 to 100 AD. So when we go to that catalog of solar eclipses from 1 to 100 AD. Now, I've actually done this myself, taking the liberty and time to pretty much look and browse through all of these, because again, folks, what we're trying to get and what we're trying to understand is to see if there is a correlation when it comes to the real day that Yahusha could have died in the real year that he was resurrected. Because I'm so tired of our enemies lying to us and telling us, oh, it was this, oh, it was that, when the word says to what? Trust not your enemies indeed. So this was the day that we were led to, this one right here on March 28th, 24 AD. Now, please understand that at this time, this was not based on the Gregorian calendar. There was no such calendar as the Gregorian calendar during this time. They used what's called the Julian calendar, and that's how they were able to track the days, months, and years during that time, because again, Roman captivity was running rampant, and that was the major captivity during that time. So please understand that this is not the same as the Gregorian calendar. So this is not the same as the Gregorian March 28th, 24. I have to really specify that because people might think that they're the same thing, but no, they are two totally different calendars. They're two totally separate dates. In fact, at the time that this video is being made on the Gregorian March 29th, it is a different Julian date. So when you click on this day, this is what you get for this. So again, I went to the catalog, I clicked on March 28, 24 AD. Now, this is what you will find when you click on this. And again, all of this will be linked in the description box below so that you can take a look at it on your own time and so that you can see it for yourself. Now, again, folks, there are some really interesting things about this, as you can just see right here. Again, maps tell stories. And again, like we talked about in our True Locations video, how the scriptures is also a geographical book as well, just like it's a history book, just like it's a poetry book, just like it's a book about our culture. Well, it's also a book about our geography. And again, we've done how many videos proving that this area of Africa, or Southern Africa as it's known today, was once upon a time the real scriptural Jerusalem, the real scriptural Yasharal. It's where pretty much 90% of scripture took place in this area. And again, I don't have time to go over that now. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, or if you're new to this subject or topic, or if you just need a refresher, what I recommend you do is search True Locations Truth Unveiled 777 in YouTube. Search it in the search bar and you will find those videos re-uploaded, and you can take a look there on your own time. I just don't have time to go over it now. But we know that this is the real scriptural location. So because we know that, the scripture also tells us that Yahusha died in the place of the skull. Now, there have been people who have done correlations and actually made things about how the continent of so-called Africa actually looks like a skull. So is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But take a look at this total solar eclipse that occurred on this day, on March 28th, 24 AD. What you will see is that it not only passes over our land, but you'll see that the moment of the eclipse occurring, again, a total solar eclipse. So the moment that the sun was in fact darkened by the moon was what? Right over our land. And what you start to see is that this day is significant because was this day considered Passover potentially during the ancient scriptural times? We're now here at timeanddate.com, and the reason we are here is because we're taking a look at the Julian calendar, because again, that calendar just showed you with the map on it of the total solar eclipse that just so happened to occur over our land, that just so happened to occur more than likely in the place where Yahusha actually died and was resurrected. We know that what? Him and his taught ones walked and browsed around that land, because what? So-called Cape Town today is known as what? Capernaum, and Table Mountain, I believe, is truly where the Sermon on the Mount took place. And they even talked about that. We talked about that in previous videos about how they have that with Table Mountain, and how they also have what? The mountain of the 12 taught ones, or the 12 disciples. Is that a surprise or a coincidence how that's located in today's so-called Cape Town? And that eclipse just so happened to take place over the same region in the same country. And we've already gone over in our True Locations video the prophetic significance of so-called South Africa. Why do you think there was apartheid in those regions? Why do you think there are whites in that region even to this day that are trying to keep us out from certain places and regions? Why do you think that's the case? And why do you think this is the only nation in the world that has gone through such apartheid and oppression? Why do you think that's the case? Because they don't want you to know your history. They don't want you to know real scriptural events. They don't want you to know true scriptural history, not anymore. They can no longer continue to justify their lies. But here we are at timeanddate.com looking at 24 AD in the Julian calendar. And the reason we're here is because we're looking at that date that we just saw that the total solar eclipse occurred over our land. And it said March 28th, 24. Now, why is this date so significant? Pay careful attention to this date. You see right here that according to this day, it was a day 3, a so-called Tuesday. Why might that be very important for you to know and understand? Because again, the question we're trying to figure out is, according to the ancient scriptural calendar, according to the ancient Enoch calendar, because yes, the book of Enoch is scripture, now you should be seeing why they've hidden all this from you. Now you should be seeing and uncovering and identifying the witchcraft that they've told you and spoon-fed to you that, oh, the book of Enoch is not scripture at all. Oh no, that's just hearsay. Folks, that is witchcraft because they don't want you to know the truth. Not anymore. Why is this so important? Because again, day 3 on the ancient Enoch calendar always points to Passover. And on top of that, as you can see right here, there was a full moon that occurred that year just 2 weeks prior on 3/14 or March 14th of 24 AD as well. Now we've gone over back in 2019, if you can remember, we've gone over that around the time of the full moon, around this time, that always marks either the end or the beginning of the new year for us. So was that year, was around this time the new year? Because again, if it were a Tuesday night, then guess what? That's a brand new day in our count, so that begins the new year. So if this was considered the new year, then what? We know Passover, according to scripture, is the 14th day of Abiyab. So if you just count 14 days this way, with this starting as number 1, with your full moon as a witness as well, if you count that, if you do the count, then you'll arrive at the 28th being number 14. But again, don't take my word for it. Now, again, I don't have time to go over everything that we've already went over. Again, if you're wondering what I'm talking about, or if you're new to this stuff or need a refresher, I highly recommend you take a look at our ancient Enoch calendar video that was done already, that was originally done back in 2018, but then was re-uploaded back in 2020, 2021, that talks more about this. Now, again, we talked about the structure of the Enoch calendar, how it's 364 days, how it follows a 30-30-31 system every single quarter. But remember how we also talked about how this calendar agrees with the restored resurrection timeline. What am I talking about? Because if we keep going with the video that was already done on this, I'm just going to let the video play out right now. What you'll see is, again, that Passover, according to the ancient Enoch calendar, he died on Passover, or the 3rd day of the week, or on a so-called Tuesday. Then he was buried in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights on 115, 116, and 117, the first 3 days of unleavened bread, equivalent to Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then he was resurrected on that Sabbath to become our what? Sabbath Pesach lamb, or Passover lamb, to become sovereign of the Sabbath, just like his word talks about. So then we also talked about how he was resurrected on the 18th day of Abiyab, or 118, according to the Enoch calendar right here. As you can see, the 18th is right there. Let me just play it so you can see it a little bit better. But months 1, 4, 7, 10, the 18th was that Sabbath in order to become the first fruits as of the 19th. And again, scripture talks about that, the waving of the sheaf offering, the Omer offering, that's needed during that time. So again, we know that according to this is a scriptural fact, and we've gone over this, proving it scripturally as well. Now, remember, we also talked about that there was scriptural proof that 223, or the 23rd day of the 2nd month, is also a Sabbath or a Shabbat. And again, if you need a refresher, then please take a look at this video. If you want, I can link it in the description box below, because this will give more information about this in case you're wondering. But here, according to the ancient Enoch calendar, Months 2, 5, 8, and 11, the 23rd day of the second month is always going to be on a Sabbath. And we have scriptural proof of that as we went over in this video when it came to what? When it came to the Exodus account. Remember the 3 days journey in Bamadabar, or Numbers chapter 10, that we went over in verses 11 and verse 33, where we talked about how it said the 20th day of the second month that the cloud was taken up from the dwelling place of the witness, and then they went on a journey of 3 days, and for the 3 days journey, they went to seek out a resting place. Well, remember how we counted that, and we said the 3 days journey was on day 1, marked the 20th day of the second month. That was the first day they went out. And then the second day was the 21st day of the second month. The third day was the 22nd day of the second month. And then what? They were looking for a resting place. So that means the 23rd day of the second month would have been that Sabbath. But that's not the only place that we find that day being the Sabbath. Another witness that we have for this, of course, is the manna account in Shamuth, or Exodus chapter 16, where it talks about the manna account, where it says that they went out from Ayalam on the 15th day of the second month, which would have been the day before the Sabbath, which would have been that 216 according to the ancient KHANUK ENOCH calendar. And then after that, YAHUAH instructs about the raining bread from the Shamayim, or heavens, and about what? That on the 6th day that they would prepare twice, and that every day he would bring in the manna, but not on the Sabbath because they were supposed to rest on it. And so again, for a refresher, I'm going to briefly play this part again. Now, again, I know I'm going pretty fast with this, but again, I want to really go through this, especially for people who already know this and who've already been paying attention to this. Again, it will be linked in the description box below so that you can have a reference for this. But it says here in Exodus 16 that what? And it came to be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So remember, the manna count began on 217 after the Sabbath on that 216. So when you start your count on 217, you have day 1 on 217, day 2 on 218, day 3 on 219, and so forth. Now day 22, that was the day that it rained twice as much manna according to Exodus 16:5 and Exodus 16:22. However, day 7, that 223 would have been the Shabbat, meaning no manna rained on that day. And according to this video, as you can see, the 23rd day of the second month is also a Shabbat according to this account. So we also have the Numbers 10 account. So we have 2 witnesses to prove that the 23rd day of the second month is in fact a Sabbath. Now, I did not go over this witness in the original Enoch calendar video as I intended to, but another day that we have as a witness for the Sabbath is the 14th day of the 12th month as well. Now, I know I did not go over this in the original Enoch calendar video, but I will reference it in this video to prove that not only was the 23rd day of the second month a Sabbath, as we just read, not only when it came to the Numbers account, but also in Exodus 16, the 14th day of the 12th month was also considered a Sabbath, and you will find that account and witness in the book of Hadassah, or so-called Esther, chapter 9. Now, when you take a look at that chapter, we're going to be reading from verses 17, where it says, that was on the 13th day of the new month. Now, again, they use the term Adara, but that should say the 12th month, because our months do not have names to them except the first one, which is Abyab. They are just numbered. But our enemies came to put names and idols on them, and that's what we're doing to restoring and taking that away. So, again, it says the 13th day of the 12th month. And on the 14th, they rested in it and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Verse 18 says, but the Yahudim who were at Shushan assembled on the 13th as well as on the 14th, and on the 15th they rested in it and made it a day of feasting and gladness. And then verse 19 says, therefore the Yahudim of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns were making the 14th day of the 12th month. And again, we talked about in this video how it should not say moon. That was a purposeful mistranslation. It should say month and not moon. But they made the 14th day of the 12th month a good day of gladness and feasting, and for sending portions to one another. So again, this book talks about, in that chapter talks about how the 14th day They what? They rested on it. The 12th month, the 14th day. 12th month, 14th day, Sabbath, day of rest. So once again, we see that this agrees with the KHANUK Enoch calendar. These are just witnesses of this. So now that we've once again just proven this calendar once more, you start to see that what? According to this calendar, we see that indeed the 14th day of Abyab, or the first month, occurred on day 3, or as we know today, a so-called Tuesday. That much we know. And again, the question is, does 3/28/24, that same day that just so happens to have that eclipse, does that day occur on a so-called Tuesday or a day 3? In fact, we do see that indeed. We see that 3/28/24 was in fact day 3 of the week that year. So again, that was considered Passover. And we've gone over with ancient calendrical texts how again the new year started around what? The time of the full moon beginning around the new year. So again, if you add 14 to that, you arrive right here. So 3/15 starting that at day 1, then day 14 will arrive at 3/28/24 AD. It just so happens to be the same exact day that what? That there was a total solar eclipse that occurred right over our land that happens to just so happen to agree with AURYAHU, or Luke chapter 23 verses 45 that we just read earlier ago. So if that occurred, and if this is the case, could it be possible that on 3/28/24 AD in the Julian calendar, that on this day 3, that this was in fact Passover? This was the day that YAHUSHA died to become our Passover lamb. He was in the grave during these 3 days right here, just as scripture says, because this would have been 115, or the first day of unleavened bread. This would have been 116, or the second day of unleavened bread. And this would have been 117, or the third day of unleavened bread. And then is it possible that he became resurrected and became what? Sovereign of the Sabbath, that Shabbat, or that 118 on resurrection Shabbat, in order to become the first fruits, that on 4/1/24 AD is the day that our Messiah was resurrected from the dead. Again, is that a surprise or a coincidence? I don't think so. It's looking very interesting and suspicious indeed. But again, the question is, whose report will you believe? Now, again, this could very well be a possibility because we know that he was not resurrected in this area over here. We know that the resurrection story and the death of YAHUSHA did not take place in that region. We know this for a fact. So we also know that we do not have to trust our enemies. Trust not thine enemies whatsoever. So again, with that being said, now that we see that this could have been potentially Passover during this year, according to the Julian calendar, again, this is not according to the Gregorian. These are two totally different, separate calendars. With this in mind, we also see that the word also says in Husha, Hosea chapter 6 verses 2, after 2 days he shall revive us. On the 3rd day he shall raise us up so that we dwell or live before him. Why is that so important? Because again, according to scripture, a day is like what? 1,000 years unto YAHUAH. So when it says 2 days, is it talking about what? 1 day per 1,000 years? Is it potentially talking about 2,000 years, that after 2,000 years of his death, burial, and resurrection, would that be the time that he would revive us on the 3rd day? The 3rd day talking about the 1,000-year reign, or the millennial reign, YAHUAH's Shabbat. Again, he's sovereign of the Shabbat. And as we talked about in our rainbow calendar videos, or the rainbow videos, how what? The millennial reign is what? Symbolic of YAHUSHA's reign, the 1,000-year reign, the 7th day of YAHUAH, the 1,000-year reign. Now, isn't it very interesting and suspicious indeed? Because when you add 2,000 years to this, what year do you get? And not only the year, but what's supposed to take place 2,000 years ahead of 24 AD and 2024 AD? Oh, that's right. That's right. The second eclipse over America to make the XX marks the spot on 4/8/2024. That will mark the second X, or the second eclipse. And as we've gone over before, first of all, we've gone over the prophetic significance of this. But not only that, in our restored calendar, 4/8/2024 will be what? It will be during an appointed time. It will be during unleavened bread itself. That's not a surprise or a coincidence either. Not only that, but we've talked about in previous videos about the X. We've done a scriptures often ignored on this about what? How the X in our language is what? The Tav, or the Thu, is the final letter of the language of the Yahudiah, or the Hebrew language, and we know has a numerical value of the number 400. Didn't YAHUAH promise Abraham or Abraham that we would be in this captivity for 400 years? And it just so happens to be X marks the spot, and this just so happens to be 2,000 years exactly following the death, burial, and resurrection of 24 AD, according to the total solar eclipse that occurred in our land. And by the way, that area just so happens to be where? The vicinity of the real Garden of Eden. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, you can take a look at the Garden of Eden video that was done as part of the True Location series. So you will see that the real Garden of Eden is around that exact area, around southeastern South Africa, so-called, as it's commonly known today. What are the odds that 2,000 years following that, 2,000 years following 328/24 AD and 4/1/24 AD, the potential restored death and burial and resurrection days of our Messiah, that exactly 2,000 years later that it would form an X over America? And not only that, but as we've also talked about, where is the center of this X that's forming, or the what? The Tav, as it's commonly known, the Thu, the symbol for 400. That's right. The X occurs over the city of Carbondale, Illinois, around that area of southern Illinois. The center line crossing of the 2017 and 2014 eclipses, as you can see right here, it's occurring in this area, around the area of Carbondale, Illinois. Now, again, that's interesting because as we've talked about and gone over in previous videos, that area is known as what? That area is referred to as Little Egypt. How is it that the center of that X that will be forming in 2024, exactly 2,000 years following that total solar eclipse that occurred in our land in 24 AD, that just so happens that it will be what? Occurring, the eclipse will be occurring over southern Illinois, known as Little Egypt. And not only that, but what I also did not know myself is that what? This area has many Egyptian names such as Carmi, Cairo, Thebes, Karnak, Goshen, and Dongola as well. So is that a surprise or a coincidence? You can even research this stuff yourself, folks, to see that we're not making this up, that Thebes is actually a village in Illinois today, as you can see right here. Thebes, just like the one in Egypt, it's along the Mississippi River. Wow, didn't we do a video back in so-called 2015 talking about how America is Egypt? Didn't we tell you that in Memphis, Tennessee, there just so happens to be a pyramid and even a reference to one of the Egyptian deities or the Egyptian rulers at the time on Memphis, in Memphis, Tennessee? Didn't we do a video on that and telling you about the Mississippi River, how it's so similar to the Nile River in Egypt? But were you in denial? Are you still in denial? Did you think I was just joking around and making this stuff up, or that it was some conspiracy back then? Do you still think that? Or are you seeing the prophetic significance of this? Because when you actually go to the map of Thebes, Illinois, and you start to zoom out, as I've done right here, as you can see in the same region that the X will happen to make an X marks the spot, you'll see that it's in what? Southern Illinois, and that Cairo is in the same region right here, again, where the X is supposed to X marks the spot, with the eclipses in both towns and regions. So again, is that a surprise or a coincidence? It's not looking like it. But in case you do not remember, this was my post about America being Egypt, literally right here, that was done back in 2015. In case you need a refresher, isn't it interesting? Like we've talked about, what do you see? You see the Nile River. You see how the river, again, was known as the cradle of civilization, how it flows through the entire country with about 30% of the land east of the river, 70% of it west. You see that with the Mississippi as well. No surprise or a coincidence that 30% of American land lies east of it, 70% lies west of it. That's not the only thing, because as we talked about Memphis, there was a Memphis, Egypt. Well, isn't there a Memphis, Tennessee as well? And on top of that, as we've shown you before, that there is a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee, just as there is in Memphis, Egypt. You see the pyramid, you see the statue of Ramses right here. This is located in Memphis, Tennessee, by the way, and the pyramid is sitting right on the Mississippi. Again, this nation is subliminally letting you know that they are Egypt once again, just like the pyramids, just like we've gone over the pyramids of Giza that's on the Nile, as you can see right here with the Sphinx. Where else do you see a Sphinx and a pyramid in America today? That's right, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Right here in Luxor, the Luxor right here in Las Vegas, you see the Sphinx right there and the pyramid right there. Didn't YAHUAH say that he would bring us into Egypt again with ships in Deuteronomy chapter 28? So again, all of this is prophetic, folks. It's showing you the prophetic significance of all of this. And again, how X marks the spot, as you can see right here. X marks the spot. But what are the odds that it would be 2,000 years exactly after the eclipse that occurred in 24 AD? What are the odds that it would be exactly 2,000 years following this event? So again, my question for you is, does this event of 328, 24 AD that just so happened to be on a day 3, or what could have been considered Passover back then, is it a coincidence? Could this be the real restored day that YAHUSHA actually died, and that 4/1, or so-called April 1st, 24 AD, that Sabbath, or so-called Saturday, could that have been the real day that YAHUSHA, the Messiah, was in fact resurrected? That is for you to decide. Of course, I'm just here to give you the information. I will link everything that we talked about in the description box below so that you can do your own research on your own time. But is that a surprise or a coincidence? I don't think so. It's not looking like it. So again, we can ignore what our enemies are telling us about, oh, he was resurrected on 33 AD, because they're just lying as usual, because of course, they're not going to have any so-called evidence for it. But seek YAHUAH and his true son YAHUSHA so you can see the whole truth and nothing but the truth. This is Truth Unveiled here, saying as always, Shalom.